April 4th, 2018. Daytona Beach, Florida. A routine Piper Arrow takeoff for a student pilot and an examiner ends in seconds when the left wing silently snaps away. The airplane was freshly maintained and fully legal, yet physics delivered a fatal verdict. This is not about old, neglected planes, it is about a hidden flaw inside thousands of airworthy Pipers. One invisible crack, no wider than a pin, can bring down 5 of America's most popular trainers without warning. The investigation revealed a deadly equation. Every training flight accelerates wing fatigue far beyond the logbook's illusion of safety. As the NTSB traced the disaster from a single bolt hole, flight schools across the nation scrambled to ground their fleets. Is your plane just one turn from catastrophe, or are you already flying on borrowed time? At 9:53 a.m., the Piper Arrow lifted off from the runway at Daytona Beach. The logbooks were up to date. The pre-flight inspection had found nothing out of place. In the left seat, a student pilot focused on every checklist item, every radio call, determined to earn a commercial certificate. Beside him, an FAA-designated examiner watched the climb, ready to judge each tiny movement. The air was calm. The sky was clear. There was no warning. As the airplane leveled at 900 feet, a sudden, sickening shift rippled through the cockpit. The left wing, still painted bright white, folded upward at the root. In less than a second, the metal that had carried thousands of students before them separated from the fuselage. No alarm sounded, no time to react. The Arrow rolled hard left, the nose dropping. Control vanished. The examiner's hands, trained for emergencies, found nothing to grab but empty air. The student's last sight was the ground spinning up through the windshield. Both men died on impact. The wreckage scattered across the grass, the left wing lying yards from the crumpled cabin. Emergency crews found no evidence of a mid-air collision, no sign of pilot error, no storm on the radar. The maintenance logs showed compliance with every regulation. The only clue was a jagged gray fracture at the base of the wing, hidden deep inside the main spar. In the hours that followed, Embry-Riddle grounded its entire fleet of Piper trainers. Phones rang in flight schools across the country. Instructors and students stared at the news, asking the same question. How could a certified, well-maintained airplane simply come apart in flight? The answer would not be found in the logbook. It would be found in the microscopic landscape of metal, where a microscopic crack, smaller than a grain of sand, had been growing for years, waiting for this moment. At Embry-Riddle's operations center, the decision to ground the entire Piper training fleet was made within hours of the crash. The order covered 63 PA-28 series aircraft, every Arrow, Archer, and Warrior used for instruction. Dispatchers halted all departures. Flight instructors were told to cancel lessons, even those already in the run-up area. The campus, usually alive with the sound of engines and radio chatter, fell silent as each airplane was logged out of service. Maintenance crews locked hangar doors and sealed logbooks, waiting for further instruction from university leadership and the FAA. The scope was unprecedented for a university flight program. Overnight, more than 200 students lost access to their scheduled training flights. Instructors scrambled to reorganize lesson plans, while maintenance managers began reviewing the records of every grounded aircraft, searching for any sign of undetected stress or damage. The operational impact rippled outward. Flight schedules were erased, check rides postponed, graduation dates pushed back. No one could say when the fleet would return to service. The only certainty was that no Piper would fly until the cause of the failure was understood. Instructors fielded calls from anxious students and parents, offering only the assurance that safety came first. The university coordinated with Piper Aircraft and the FAA, preparing to remove wings for inspection and collect data for investigators. The rapid stand-down sent a clear message across the industry. This was not a routine maintenance issue or an isolated mechanical problem. The risk was systemic, affecting every airplane with the same design. The fate of the entire training fleet now depended on answers that could only be found in the fractured metal of a single failed wing. Inside the NTSB materials laboratory, the failed wing spar sits under a harsh white light. The fracture surface is jagged and gray, interrupted by a smooth, almost polished region that tells a silent story. Here at the outboard forward bolt hole, the first microscopic crack began its journey. Electron microscope images reveal a landscape of parallel lines, fatigue striations, each one the record of a single stress cycle multiplied over years of touch-and-go landings and steep turns. The crack grew outward, invisible to every inspection, until more than 90% of the lower spar cap's cross-section was consumed. What remained, a thin web of metal, was no match for the forces of flight. The right wing, still attached to the wreckage, did not escape unscathed. A 0.047-inch crack was found at the same bolt hole, lurking just beneath the surface. This was not corrosion. There was no rust, no sign of water intrusion or neglected maintenance. The metal failed from within, grain by grain, as if a zipper had slowly unfastened itself beneath the paint. Under magnification, the origin point is unmistakable. The crack started at the edge of the bolt hole, where the stress of every landing was focused. Fretting wear, tiny, almost imperceptible movements between the bolt and the hole created a perfect environment for fatigue to take hold. With each cycle, the crack advanced a fraction of a millimeter, branching through the spar cap and its doublers. No amount of pre-flight checks or routine maintenance could have revealed it. Only a specialized inspection designed to detect subsurface flaws would have found the danger in time. The evidence is absolute. The metal does not lie. You can falsify a logbook, but you cannot fake a grain structure. The Daytona Arrow's wing did not fail from a single overload or a careless repair. It failed because the crack had been growing, undetected and unstoppable, until the last thread of metal finally gave way. Fatigue does not announce itself with a bang. It whispers, one microscopic advance at a time. In the Daytona Arrow, the first crack began at the edge of the outboard forward bolt hole, just a few thousandths of an inch wide, invisible to the naked eye. Each landing, each steep turn, each jolt from a hard touchdown delivered a new dose of stress. The metal around the bolt hole flexed and relaxed, day after day. With every cycle, the crack lengthened, moving through the spar cap like a slow-moving fault line. Imagine a zipper running across the width of the spar. Each tooth is a tiny segment of metal holding the wing to the fuselage. When the first tooth at the bolt hole breaks, the load shifts to the next one. That tooth holds for a while, then fails in turn. The process repeats, tooth by tooth, as the crack propagates outward from the origin. This is not a sudden event. It is a progressive failure, measured in tens of thousands of cycles. The zipper analogy is exact. Once the first few teeth go, the rest unravel with increasing speed. The final separation is instant, but the groundwork is years in the making. Electron microscope images from the NTSB lab show parallel striations, each line a record of a single stress cycle. In the Arrow spar, these striations cover more than 90% of the cross-section before the last sliver of metal lets go. The remaining metal, now carrying all the load, reaches its breaking point in a fraction of a second. Catastrophic separation follows, with no warning and no margin for recovery. This is the reality of fatigue propagation, a silent, methodical advance, perfectly recorded in the grain structure and waiting for the final cycle to finish the job. Every airplane logbook has a total time in service, but those numbers hide a deeper truth. Fatigue in metal is not measured by the clock, it is measured by cycles. In a training airplane, each hour is packed with landings, takeoffs, steep turns, and touch and goes. These cycles drive cracks forward, one stress at a time, in a way that ordinary private flying never will. To understand the real risk, engineers use a concept called factored service hours, or FSH. It is a simple calculation, but it changes everything. Start with your airplane's total hours. Now count how many of those hours were spent in flight training, pattern work, maneuvers, and repeated landings. For every one of those hours, multiply by 10. That is the multiplier the NTSB uses to describe the impact of high cycle training on fatigue. 100 hours of flight school abuse is equivalent to 1,000 hours of gentle cross-country flying. Here is how it works. Take a logbook showing 3,000 hours of private use and 2,000 hours of training. Factored service hours equals 3,000 plus 2,000 times 10. That is 3,000 plus 20,000 for a total of 23,000 factored service hours. Suddenly, a plane that looks young on paper is, in fatigue terms, already an old survivor. This is not just theory. The Daytona Arrow had thousands of hours in the training environment. The fatigue cracks in its spar did not care about the calendar or the maintenance stamps. They counted cycles. Every time a student flared too hard or bounced a landing, the spar cap flexed a little more. The math adds up quickly and the risk multiplies out of sight of the pilot. If you want to know your airplane's true age, run the numbers yourself. Open the logbook. Add up every hour spent in the pattern, every session logged for maneuvers, every flight school rental. Multiply that training total by 10, then add the rest. That number, your factored service hours, tells you how close you might be to the invisible edge. The FAA's Airworthiness Directive, AD 2220-26-16, is not a suggestion. It is a binding legal mandate that applies to a specific group of Piper airplanes, each identified by model and serial number. The directive was drafted in response to the evidence collected from the Daytona crash and subsequent fleet inspections. Engineering data pointed to a clear pattern. 5 variants of the PA-28 series showed a statistically significant risk of lower wing spar fatigue, especially in airframes exposed to high cycle use. The affected models include PA-28-151 Warrior, PA-28-161 Warrior 2 and Warrior 3, PA-28-181 Archer 2 and Archer 3, PA-28R-201 Arrow 3, and PA-28-140 Cherokee. Each of these models is covered by a defined serial number range, specified in the official text of AD 2020-26-16. For example, the PA-28-181 includes serial numbers from 2-87690001 to 2-88690061, and the PA-28R-201 covers 28R-773-7001 to 28R-7837317. The full list is published in the directive and must be checked against the data plate riveted to the airplane fuselage. There are no exceptions for maintenance history, hours flown, or apparent condition. If the serial number falls within the published range, the inspection is mandatory. The directive requires owners and operators to perform an eddy current inspection of the lower main spar cap at the outboard forward bolt hole. This is the only method proven to detect the type of subsurface fatigue that destroyed the Daytona Arrow. The inspection must be completed within a set number of flight hours or calendar months, whichever comes first. Failure to comply is a violation of federal law and grounds for immediate grounding of the aircraft. Owners who discover their airplane listed in the directive are required to document compliance and submit inspection results to the FAA. If a crack is detected, the airplane is immediately removed from service. There is no alternative. The risk is not theoretical. The directive exists because the evidence of catastrophic separation is real, and the consequences of ignoring it are fatal. The serial number check is the first step. The inspection is the second. The law does not allow for guesswork. Every owner of a covered Piper must verify their model and serial number against AD 2020-26-16. The responsibility is absolute. A certified non-destructive testing technician stands at the wing root of a grounded Piper. The inspection begins with the removal of the access panels, exposing the lower spar cap and the critical bolt holes. The technician prepares the eddy current probe, a slender, pencil-sized instrument designed to sense changes in the electrical properties of the metal. Each bolt is removed in sequence. The probe is inserted into the bolt hole. Its tip scans the inner surface for any sign of a hidden crack. The machine emits a faint tone, and a trace appears on the display. A clean signal means the metal is intact. A distorted signal means a flaw is present, possibly a crack smaller than a grain of sand. The process is methodical. Every hole is checked, every reading documented. For a single wing, the full inspection can take between 4 and 8 hours, depending on the aircraft's configuration and access. There is no shortcut. The technician's work is measured and precise, guided by the standards outlined in the AR-worthiness directive. Once the inspection is complete, the results are certified and logged. If the spar passes, the airplane can return to service. If it fails, the consequences are immediate and irreversible. The outcome of the eddy current inspection is binary and absolute. If no cracks are found, the airplane is cleared to fly. If a crack is detected, no matter how small, the airplane is grounded on the spot. There is no repair for a spar cap that fails this inspection. The lower main spar cap is the gold coin of the Piper airframe, the single most expensive, irreplaceable part. Once it is compromised, the airplane's value drops to scrap. Replacement is not practical. The cost exceeds the worth of the entire aircraft. The red tag ends the story for that airframe. For owners and operators, the checklist is simple but unforgiving. First, confirm your model and serial number against the ranges listed in AD 2020-26-16. Second, calculate your factored service hours, paying close attention to the proportion of training time. Third, schedule an eddy current inspection before the compliance window closes. Document the results and be prepared for the possibility that your airplane may never fly again. The risk is real, the cost is final, and the responsibility cannot be deferred. Every year, more than 20,000 Piper PA-28s remain in active service, many flying under the radar of invisible fatigue. AD 2020-26-16 isn't just a regulation, it is a line between assumption and certainty. As physics quietly tallies each flight hour, only vigilance stands between routine and catastrophe. The metal never forgets. How often do you really look beneath the surface? Share your thoughts below.